Okay, so we're recording this session, and we're using toxiCALL here. We're going to talk about the call recorder integration with toxiCALL using a higher ground call recorder. Since we're doing this on my box, I'm going to use what we have as a toxiCALL call simulation application. So I can actually pass in the caller ID name and phone number from this, and when I press the Make Call button, that would be similar to you picking up the phone. What I thought we would cover first is how we receive an initial call, start up a new case with that call, and some of the call association that handles and how that's handled with an actual call in progress. So as a typical spy may do, they'd be sitting at their workstation in toxiCALL. They could be working on a different case. It could be at the search window. But as a call comes in, I initiate the call. We can see the start time of the call here. With toxiCALL, we don't have an immediate indication of a call in progress, but we know that we picked up the phone. I realize that this is a new caller calling in, so I'm going to come over and click on the new case icon. The call is still recording, but what we notice here is that the timer is running, so it tells me the current duration of the call, and that we have a green icon here with the telephone with a green border around it. That indicates that there is a call in progress, and that call is currently associated to this particular case. And if you'll notice, once I hit that new case button, toxiCALL automatically populated the name of the caller based on the caller ID and the phone number. And those two features are available if the call recorder is able to pick up that information from your phone system. So we're still recording the call. This is about 1 minute into the call. And I'm actually going to hang up the call now, and you'll be able to see how toxiCALL responds to that. So I finished the call. You'll notice you may get another blip or two from the call report, the call timer, and then the call timer goes out to 0 to indicate that we've completed the call and there's currently no call in progress. We also have a little green icon over here, which I believe is typically red if there are no calls associated with the case. But right now we have one call that's associated with this case, and I can come in here and actually look at that call. I can press the listen button, and you can actually hear I'm actually playing back that call, and I can pause it. My playback is a little bit different. You guys are configured to use the instant retrieval directly from higher ground, which gives you a lot more playback capabilities. But this just gives me the ability to play it back through the Windows player. And we can see the call duration was about 1 minute and 4 seconds, as is reflected up here. So if I close that window, we can make any adjustments we need to with the case. I'm just going to say this is an information case, and I'm going to save that case out as an open case. Now, there's another tool in here we haven't talked about, and I don't know that I have it enabled right now, but it's the Recent Cases window. So I pressed Control-R on my keyboard to bring up recent cases. Another way to bring this up is to use the View and Recent Cases menu. Some poison centers that are using this actually keep this on the screen all the time while they're in toxiCALL. They actually have it on a second monitor. So you can use this window to do quick references to find calls that might be on your database. So I'm going to make another call from that same caller. And now we've initiated the call recording. It's in progress. And since I don't have recent cases enabled properly right now, we're not seeing that, but I can actually do some searches to find the call. So once I pick up the caller, I realize that they're calling from this number 1234. I can type in 1234 and do a search. It'll show me any cases that have that phone number in there. I'll simplify this a little bit. We'll come out of the recent cases, and we'll locate this call. So I know from talking to the caller now that it's that same caller calling me back again. So I pull up that same case on the screen. And notice this time when I pull up the case, I get the previous information, as you always would with toxiCALL, but I have the call timer counting up, and I have a red flashing icon to indicate that the call's in progress, but it is not yet associated with this call, with this particular case. The reason for that is toxiCALL does not want to automatically associate a call, because you can have a case on the screen where you're making an outbound call to, say, order lunch, or you're working on closing out the details of a case. You take a new call in that may not be associated with the case that you have in progress. So it doesn't automatically associate this call recording with that case. As soon as I press the red flashing icon, you'll notice it turns to green, and now I've associated that call with that case. So we can continue chatting with the caller, we can hang up, and you'll notice the call timer resets back to 0. One thing to take note of is that if you hang up that call, the call is disconnected before you click on this flashing icon, it does not get associated with the case, and you can't do it from this screen after the fact. So as an example, the same caller calls back a third time, or perhaps I made an outbound call back to that caller. This time I am not going to press the red flashing icon, which would associate it with this case, and I'm going to disconnect the call. So what happens now is we have that case, and if I look in here, we only have 2 calls associated with this case and not the third call. So I'm actually going to go to the Call Manager window. It gives me a little bit more of a detailed view. So I can see the details on the case that I'm looking at, and I can see the 2 call recordings that are associated. But in the right pane for this window, I see calls that are not associated with this particular case. So I can expand that and view the details. I can come in here. I can listen to that particular call. So notice that's the 15-second call that we made, but we did not associate it. The beauty with this screen is that I realize, hey, I forgot to press the red flashing icon. All I need to do is come over here, drag this, and drop it on top of the case details. And notice it's gone from this window, and we've now associated that call with this particular case. If I realize that the second call in here was actually for a different case, I can drag it, move it to the right pane. I thought I could. And normally that's how you would drag that back over to the other pane. Lori, if you recall the conversation we had yesterday, that's the locked message. Apparently it wasn't taken care of for both directions. So from here, this is where you would actually be able to associate calls from your workstation back over to the other, back over to that case. One thing to keep, well, I'll discuss this window in a moment, but one thing to keep in mind, when we're looking at this call manager from within a case, it only shows me the one case that we're in and viewing right now. There's another more advanced call manager that we can get to from the search menu that looks very similar to this, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Coming down to the options window, I'm just going to focus on this section for right now, but we can choose which non-associated calls we want to display. So right now I'm limiting to only show calls from my workstation for the last 24 hours. But let's say that I'm going to go ahead and look at all date range for all workstations, and if I had those settings in here, I just have to reload that window. So if I have more unassociated calls, which I do, notice this call is from a different workstation and hasn't been associated and was actually created February 10th, 2 years ago. So I could then come in and see other calls and associate them with this case. Let's see, I'm going to reset. No, I'm going to leave these settings here. So far, with what we've talked about with an incoming new call, creating a new case, and linking a follow-up call to an existing case, do we have any questions so far?
No.
Okay, pretty straightforward. So the beauty of what to remember here is that new cases, as soon as you hit the new case icon, it's associated automatically. And then if you create any follow-up calls while that particular case that is related to the call recording in progress is on the screen, you can click on the icon. So another scenario that we might want to create here is I'm closing out my notes on this case. A call comes in. I answer the call. Notice that we have the call recording button flashing here, but I know it's a new call, so I can come in, create the new case icon, press the new case icon button, it's immediately associated in its full duration, and I can make any changes that I need to with that case. If we go back to the other case, it's still on the screen. Notice that we're not associated there. So the call is still recording, but it's not associated with that particular case. Okay, so I'm going to end the call. I'm going to close out both of these case windows. And next what we're going to do is look at the ability to manage larger sets of call recordings. So I'm going to make just a couple extra call recordings here in short duration, so we have a few more that we're going to look at. Okay, now when I come into toxiCALL, when you do your display lookup, there's a new call manager window. And we have that associated on your system. For me, I can easily scroll down to the bottom of the list, or if I just type in call man, it'll filter the list. And I'm going to select call manager. Notice this is going to be what's called a tree view. It'll look very similar to the call management window that we had in the other screen a moment ago. And you can use the search criteria to limit which cases you want to see brought back in this particular view. This view gives us the ability to see the case information on the left-hand side and the non-associated call recordings on the right-hand side. So if you remember the last two calls that we've been working on, this call is still open. It's the first one that we created during this testing phase. It was the caller was actually test caller, and it was a drug information case. And I can slide this panel around. If I want to change the view, I can see the start date and time on a case. I can expand the details and even view the case information. If we typed in more details of the case, we'd be able to see that there. I can also view the call recordings that are currently associated with that case. And notice here we have those 3 call recordings. I can also come over to the right side and view the details. Let's see here. So here's a test call. So I just click on the main line for each one of these and press listen. And I can do the same thing on this side. I can come back and review the call recordings on an individual case without actually having to open up that case. But at this point, if we listen to some of these non-associated calls and we realize that it needs to be associated, if I want to associate this call, let's say that we have a multiple exposure case. What I can do is I've got 2 calls that both need to be associated with this call recording. So remember, that's the 123302 call, and I can take that and drag it over. And notice that you get the little phone icon that pops up. But if I hold down the control key, let's see here, we may have to do it this way. Okay, so when it's associated to the first call, I can hold down the control key and drag it over to the second call. Now notice we have that call recording, same call recording associated to both of these cases. So this is something you would do in an instance where you have 1 call recording and you've got 10 exposures for the same call recording. So you'd be able to drag and drop those around. And the same holds true for the second call recording. Let's say that it was just associated with this case. I can drag and drop it here. I realize it doesn't need to be there. I can drag and move it back and then associate it with a different call. So you have complete drag and drop capabilities between these 2 panes. The thing to keep in mind is you always want to drag the top portion where you have the plus or minus symbol, and you always want to drag it to the top portion, which is the plus or minus symbol for each individual call you're associating it to. The next piece I'd like to point out is this display of the non-associated cases. Again, if I'm trying to do a lot of cleanup for all the calls in the center, I might want to enable all workstation view. For most specialists, they'll want to keep it at their particular workstation view so that they can clean up their calls that are not associated at the end of their shift. They'll be able to have their list limited to just the calls that they've made during their shift and drag and drop them to the respective cases that they need to be associated with. And you can just limit how far back you want to look at this. if this list, we've occasionally had centers who've not gone through and done their cleanup, so they don't necessarily want to look back at all the non-associated cases calls. They just want to look at the last 24 hours. The top portion of this display allows me to choose what information I want to see on the screen. So at your center, you're not dealing with multiple center codes, so you probably don't want to see the center code displayed in there and the year code. Both of those you can turn off, and you'll notice when we refresh this window, it'll save some screen real estate. We can also change the status to display as an abbreviated status, OP for open, or full text where it'll actually spell out open. And notice down here we have quick save cases and CL for closed as well. We can choose to display or suppress the caller name, patient name, the first substance, call type, and so on. So each workstation has its own control over this configuration, and it's saved as a per workstation basis. So notice I save that information, I rerun my search criteria, and once this updates, we'll be able to see we just have the case number shown here, and we don't get the center code, year code taking up the extra screen space. And since I'm viewing just for my workstation, I no longer have that 2-year-old test call recording that we had in place there as well. One other feature to keep in mind here is we have the ability to take a call recording. Let's say that this one is not associated with the case. And if I right-click, I can edit the note for that call, or I can mark it as non-related. So in this example, I'm going to come up here and just give it a note and say, call for lunch. So I actually place the call out for lunch on this, and I now want to mark this case, mark this particular call as non-related. So notice right away that it removes it from this list so we don't see the non-related cases. I can show the non-related cases, which we see here, and it's currently marked as unrelated. And I'll differentiate that by dragging another one over here. Oops. I can't drag that over because it's on another case. Let's see here if I can bring the long one. I don't want to bring the long one over. There we go. So now I've brought this over, and notice that if it's related or assumed to be related, it does not indicate whether it's related or not. And I can turn the unrelated cases on or off. But this is an important feature to note because there will be times where you make calls and you have call recordings in your system that should not be associated to a case, and that's going to be the simple way to get those cleaned up when you're closing out your shift as well. That, in a nutshell, is the easy way to go back and do your associations, and shows how they're associated automatically. So at this point, I guess I'll open the floor up for any questions.
Tom, is there, I think I know the answer to this question, but I better ask anyway. Is there any way that a specialist or a person could delete a call, delete the recording?
Not from this screen and not through toxiCALL. What toxiCALL is doing is it's only dealing with associations. And we end up having a pointer to the file of where those calls are stored so that toxiCALL knows where those are. And we show that in case we need to reference that for support purposes. But all of this doesn't actually touch the call itself. It only touches information that points to that call recording.
Good.
I have a question. Can you hear me okay, Tom?
I can.
Okay, good. What if a call is associated with the wrong case, but you don't know which case it is? Is there an easy way to try to find that call?
The answer to that question is that you can search for calls. So let's talk about what you do know about the call. And you probably have some details about the call. Could be the telephone, the caller ID number, the caller ID name. You could have some elements of information on that call recording. There's another piece that I'm not showing here, which is when you go into instant retrieval, toxiCALL is pushing information back to instant retrieval as well. So the easiest way to find it is that if you're in instant retrieval and you see that call recording, it will generally tell you, well, it should tell you right away, which case number that call recording is associated with, if in fact it's associated with a case. So under this call recordings tab, we have the ability to do some searches based on the workstation the call recording was made from, and some other details. And this we can play around with your live data to see how we would search that out. Or you can use instant retrieval to get the case number. And once you know that information, then you can go back, you can actually go to that case and remove that association.
Okay. And then I have another question. What is the difference between Call Manager and Call Manager Advanced?
So when we look at those two, it's the same difference that we have when we go to Case List and Case List Advanced. So notice right now with Call Manager, we have only 3 tabs on the screen. Tab 2 is the General Search tab that users will see if they're just in the Case List view. So when I come down to Call Manager Advanced, this is the same thing as Case List Advanced, where we get a lot more search tabs across the top to be able to search more detailed information about a case.
Okay. And that is searching for the case, not the call.
These tabs here are directly associated with the case. That's correct, not the call.
Okay.
When we're in the Call Manager, because it looks like that the Recordings tab is only available in the call. No, I'm sorry. Tab 2 is searching case information. Tab 3 is call recording. So this is searching based on the call recording link information that we have.
Okay, but only calls that are associated.
No, this should search for non-associated calls as well, I do believe. Calls that are not associated. But we'll probably have to test that in your environment since I'm not sure. Now, let me see if we can do a sample here. Always fun to try these things out.
Oh, okay, so it does. It finds it all.
Well, I didn't put any search criteria right now.
I see, I see.
So I think this will only search for associated calls, but I'm not positive. Let's see what we can find out here. Because actually, I believe that is correct because all the non-associated are going to go in this column, and your search results based on the criteria go on the left side.
Okay. Okay. That's good enough.
Okay.
I have one more question for you, Tom. You pointed out that you should be associating cases or calls with cases by using the header rather than dragging the WAV file portion. So you've got sort of the header that has information on the number, the status, whether it's opened or closed. Why is that? Does it matter really? So if I dragged it over using the WAV file portion of it, does it not drag all of the information over?
It's actually the placement portion which is more important. So if you'll notice here, I'm coming in and I grab the file.
Yep.
I can actually, let me make sure I'm not looking at the super old one. Okay. So I'm grabbing the WAV file. Notice it gives me the icon to say, hey, you're in the middle of a drag process. But notice when you come in here, it grabs the header information. So once the header is highlighted, you can do the drop. So in this area, we're doing just fine. We're able to drag and drop anywhere within here. So that actually worked. But I think in the other screen, when you're inside of the case, it worked a little bit differently. What I'm going to do here, typically double-clicking opens and closes the plus and minus of that branch. But if I want to view the case, I can right-click and come down to Open Case. I can do my print preview. I can download the case. So it works just like your regular case list view. So from right in here, I can come right in, and still manage the case. What I wanted to see is the call manager in here. So in this particular instance, I have to grab a case and drag the actual call recording. Now, if you recall, we had that issue where it's got it's viewing the case as locked. But I can do that from this side here. So let me go ahead and make another call recording. We're doing another test, hanging it up now. So this time when I come into the call manager, I have my call recording here. And I'm going to drag, just grabbing the file again. Okay, so as long as it's highlighting that header, that's what needs to happen to know for sure that you're on the right case.
Okay.